We are hanging out.
Oh, we're hanging. And that doesn't sound good. So we're hanging out. That sounds a lot better.
Yeah,
Okay. So good to speak with you again. Have you got a word for the day today? Have you?
I certainly do.
Okay.
And the word of the day is tomfoolery.
Tomfoolery. Well, that sounds quite apt for you. Are you going to fool around, Tom?
Playful or foolish behaviour.
Yeah.
An example is Scott grew up one of three boys in a house with a strict mother who did not tolerate any tomfoolery.
Ah, nice. Well, not great for him, obviously, unless he was strict as well. Okay, great. So tomfoolery is that is a good word, and we're going to try and incorporate it into the discussion. I think that's quite an easy one if we're going to talk about today, because today is St. Valentine's Day or Valentine's Day, however you want to call it. Are there any other names for it? I don't know.
Certainly not the
Um,
person to ask about that.
no. Well, I'm currently in Spain, as you know, where the sun is shining and the weather is sweet, to quote Bob Marley, power Bob Marley. And they here call it Dia de los Enamorados, which means the day of the lovers' day. Just a bit more steamy, perhaps. Um, but yeah, so I guess we need to talk about St. Valentine's Day, even a little bit, perhaps, just because it is St. Valentine's Day, and then maybe we can take the discussion on to other things. Because I don't take this the wrong way, Tom, but you don't strike me as the most romantic fellow in the world. Is that fair?
Well, I think I'm not sure I'd want to be the most romantic fellow. I think on the scale you'd want to have some balance.
See, that's exactly what I mean. That's not a very romantic answer. Mind you, I'm quite glad of that because I'm not sure how this would feel if you came across all romantic with me. Perhaps your lovely wife is in a better position to judge whether you're romantic or not. But yeah, it's something certainly that I think that doesn't necessarily come easily to men, generally speaking. I know it doesn't necessarily to me. Although I have been known to do some romantic things, some romantic gestures. But I just did a little bit of background. I mean, when I say a little bit, I whacked up Wikipedia and read the introduction because it's quite a long page.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you're interested to know a little bit about it, where it comes from, etc., etc. But
Well, I like to question social norms, and we were speaking very briefly yesterday about it, and we thought we'll hold off the conversation until we're actually live.
okay, good.
The question that was posed, which I guess you're going to answer, is where the hell does it even come from anyway? Um,
Well, I might not be able to answer that because I am quoting from Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is renowned for being factually accurate. But what I will tell you, in sort of my vague attempt to answer that question, is that apparently it honors one or two early saints named Valentinus.
mhm.
So it comes from the Catholic Church, from Rome, and it's associated with martyrdom stories with various Valentines connected to February the 14th. So it mentions a few of them, and I'm not going to bore everybody by going into. I mean, if anyone is listening and they're really interested, you can very quickly go to the Wikipedia page, and I'm sure Tom, you will be very happy to put the link, or I can put the link underneath if you're really lazy and you can't be bothered to find it yourself. But it's it's really very simple to find. So anyway, briefly, Saint Valentine of Rome's imprisonment for performing weddings for soldiers who were forbidden to marry. Doesn't say exactly why, although it may have done if I'd have read the whole article. And for ministering to Christians who were prosecuted under the Roman Empire. So he was, I guess, an early Christian. It didn't say that, but he must have been a Christian when Christianity was outlawed, and he was performing Christian weddings, which presumably Rome didn't accept under law. We've been through fairly recently quite a lot of things about gay marriage and things not being accepted, and and then being accepted and so on. So I suppose these kind of things have been going on in one guise or another for millennia. So that was one of them. And then he got arrested, and according to legend, during his imprisonment, who we're now calling Saint Valentine, Valentinus, restored the sight to the blind daughter of his judge, and before his execution, he wrote her a letter and signed it, "Your Valentine," as a farewell. So I guess it sounds all a bit too convenient to me if I'm not going to be very romantic about it and try and sit down and analyze whether it's something that may or may not have happened. But I guess there's where there's smoke, there's fire. So we'll give it the benefit of the doubt, I guess. But
A lot of the stories over time get slightly glamorized and exaggerated, don't they, by
yeah.
humans? But what's interesting to me is how from what you just said, how we go from that to what it is today.
Yeah, well, it mentions that a little bit because I'm sure you're aware of Geoffrey Chaucer, the Canterbury, I guess one of the earliest novelists, I suppose, and he wrote in sort of poem form. I'm not a literary expert, so again, Wikipedia if you want to find out more about him. But he became associated with romantic love, and he was really interested in romantic love, and a lot of his stories are about that kind of thing. And he was kicking around in Canterbury area in the 14th century in England. And so he kind of wrote a lot of stories, which are, you can still read them today. And in fact, if you want, there's a really good audiobook channel, which I'm going to plug right now, called Fab Audiobooks. Sorry about plugging, but Fab Audiobooks is another channel. And it's got loads of free audiobooks, including some by Chaucer. So there you go, the Canterbury Tales. Anyway, they kind of influenced the UK. I think they influenced the sort of romantic knight in shining armor kind of thing that we kind of associate with the Middle Ages, which of course I'm pretty confident that the Middle Ages were just a horrible time to be alive. Death, Black Death, murder, rape, pillage, all sorts of stuff, horrible things going on there. And probably people only lived to 30 years or so on average if they were lucky. So not a great time, but we kind of associate that with sort of the chivalrous knight, don't we? In his shining armor, rescues the fair maiden and kills the dragon and so on. And I guess that kind of got installed into the UK, into sort of English folklore. And then in the 18th century, in the Victorian times, and they were quite an interesting bunch, the Victorians, as we all know. But they sort of really took it to heart, and lovers then started expressing their love for each other, presenting flowers, offering confectionery, and sending greeting cards called Valentines. So I think that's how it kind of got to us. Interestingly, in Europe, because I'm here in Spain, as I said, and they don't really have a tradition of cards. They don't send Christmas cards, birthday cards. In fact, they don't send cards at all. Get well soon cards, nothing. So there's no tradition of cards. But they do have a different tradition, which you may have seen if you've visited the continent. You go to a romantic spot, like a beautiful bridge over a sort of a nice rushing stream, in a pretty landscape, and you might come across lots of keys. And you see them in Spain in these kind of places. Hundreds and hundreds of not keys, sorry, locks. Padlocks, and the padlock is a symbol of the lover's heart. And then they will put the padlock, in somewhere like often it's on a bridge, somewhere like that. And then the lovers will have the keys, and they'll throw the keys into the water, and that represents their locking in their heart for each other, and that nobody can ever take that apart. And so, very often, it's true. You see it. It's quite a lovely romantic gesture. But I wonder I wonder how they feel. A lot of these relationships, they're sort of often teenagers, I imagine. And I wonder how many of them actually break up at some point and have to walk past that very same bridge,
Well, it would be interesting to know whether it makes any difference. I'm sure. Well, I don't know that there probably is any research on it, but it would be interesting to know whether taking part in that activity has any impact on the
what,
sustainability of the relationship. But
what a great idea. Yeah. There should be some. If there isn't research on that, then there certainly should be. Yeah, that's a good point.
one of the things you were saying about, because I posed this question recently about the concept of cards, sending people cards.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things which is just pure tradition and has absolutely almost no place in there's no need for it anymore. Like
No.
we can speak to each other, we can message each other, literally see each other on the phones that we now have. Yet what we
Yeah.
currently do is buy a piece of card, write a message on it, put it in a box that then a guy or girl has to empty, take it
Yeah.
across wherever it needs to go, and then physically deliver it to someone who then opens it that you could have just sent an instant message to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird, isn't it? It's a kind of a warped version because obviously at some point, and especially the idea of a Valentine's card coming from a secret admirer, I mean, you can understand that.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know about you, but when I was at school, there was a lot of pressure on Valentine's days, and there was a lot of competition, which is obviously where the pressure came from. So you'd be like, how many? They'd all be asking, how many Valentine's cards did you have? How many did you get? And of course, you'd get just the one from your mother. You'd be like, I got one. Yeah, who is that from? And of course, it would say X or something, and I'd have it in my lunch box or something. So I go, yeah, look, I got one there. And you couldn't. I knew who it was from, but nobody else did. Um, and then I don't know about you, but one year I actually felt I'm not going to mention any names, but I kind of didn't fancy any of the girls in my school at that time, which was unusual for me. But at that time, I really didn't, and I kind of felt obliged to send. There was quite a lot of pressure to send Valentine's cards, and so I remember I guess I just picked the prettiest girl. I should have picked probably the girl that was sort of most likely not to get any cards, but I wasn't socially aware enough to sort of to see how that might have been nice for her. But it would have been a lie anyway because I wasn't really a secret admirer. But I picked the prettiest girl and I sent her a card, and it was a secret admirer, and I thought nothing more of it because she was pretty, but I didn't fancy her. Not any more than anyone does fancy pretty girls. There wasn't certainly no special feeling. And yet then she spent ages trying to uncover who'd given her this card, and she'd got loads of cards, but she didn't know who this one was from, and it became this big witch hunt, and I was at the bottom of it, and eventually, of course, she did find out it was from me. You can't keep secrets at schools, and then she was convinced that I fancied her, and she acted completely differently from me, and of course, because I didn't fancy her, she kind of started to get it, I guess, try and make, maybe she thought the magic had gone somehow, and she was trying to sort of flirt more outrageously and things in front of me, which was a very weird and unforeseen consequence of doing this. But I guess if I'd have done the thing that I just mentioned, which until this moment I'd never thought of, if I'd have sent the cards to the girl who I thought was sort of likely not to get any and would feel kind of sad and unhappy, then maybe she would have, felt, if she'd have discovered that it was me and it wasn't real, it probably would have done her more harm than good. So, or she might have even decided that I was the one for her or something. So, I'm kind of glad I didn't do that in the end. I think it comes back to something we discussed before, which is, it pays to be honest. But anyway, so did you have something like that at your school?
well, what sort of age are we talking about now?
Well, I guess we're talking about sort of, I don't know, 14, 15, something like that.
I think younger there was something similar to that, but No, I think it was 14, 15. You're talking many more people, so I don't recall anything like that. Although my memory isn't the best from back when I was a kid. I know lots of people remember all sorts of details, but I don't remember it much at all.
That's funny. My wife is like that. She doesn't remember much from when she was younger, but she's got a great memory nowadays. So I, on the other hand, remember really well from way back in the day. But when it comes to sort of things that I did very recently, I haven't got a clue. I mean, why am I in this room right now? What are we talking about?
I saw a video from a neuroscientist on sleep, actually. It popped up because you know what YouTube's like with recommendations.
Yeah.
That if you deprive yourself of a certain amount of sleep, the part of the brain which sort of allows new memories to form basically shuts off. So with respect to memory, this is basically if you don't get enough sleep, you're not going to remember. Obviously, this is a certain amount of hours, and within reason. But that's one of the symptoms of not getting enough sleep is that your short-term memory basically doesn't receive that information anymore.
So basically, what you're saying is I should sleep more, really, in that case.
Well, I don't know how much you sleep already, but that might be a way to go.
Well, it's a funny thing, I probably normally go to sleep at about midnight. I've never been one to go to sleep early. I find it difficult to go to sleep early, but I tend to go to sleep around about midnight, and I wake up at around about 7:30, 7 o'clock. So, 7.5 hours. It's not too bad. I think it's all right. But anyway, I mean, it's a whole nother topic of conversation, and we could do a talk about dreams, and not necessarily sort of identifying what dreams mean. There's a lot of sort of I guess faux science about that, which
I used to think all that stuff was real, all that what your dreams mean type stuff. But as far as I'm aware, the conclusion is that it's just made up of the experiences of your day, and they don't really mean much at all.
No, they're fairly abstract, aren't they? But then there's all sorts of things. I tried when I was younger. I used to get a lot of very vivid dreams. When I was younger, when I was a child, I used to get lots and lots of very vivid dreams, and I used to have dreams that would repeat. So I'd have the same dream again and again and again, and things like this. But I don't seem to these days. But I do think that a lot of it is about your body clock, and it's about if you wake up in the middle of a dream, you tend to remember it, although you can very quickly forget it sometimes. But if you wake up in the middle of a dream, you tend to remember it. But if you wake up when the dream is finished, because you hear these statistics and they say the average person dreams about 7 times a night and so on and so forth when you're in the REM state, and it's only then and this and that. But and I think that can happen. So what would happen when I was at school is I would have an alarm, and the alarm would go off, and I've got an alarm today that's on sleep, but when I wake up, I tend to just wake up and just lie there going, I've got another 5 minutes until the alarm sleep thing goes off again. But back then, I just used to fall straight back into sleep, and I tended to be in the middle of a dream, and then I would kind of remember the dreams, and in some way, I was able to control them a little bit. And we're not, I'm not talking. What's the word where you can have full control of your dreams? I never had full control of my dreams, but I was able to control them a little bit because I would frequently wake up right in the middle of the dream and sort of become sort of half awake and then fall back to sleep again. So that was really cool, but I've not really had that for very many years. But I can tell you one dream that I had. They say, they're metaphors, aren't they, dreams? But I mean, they're even in the Bible, with the Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat or whatever. Anyway,
is that in the Bible?
It's either on the Bible or in the West End in the theatre. I'm not quite sure.
I don't think I remember seeing that in the Bible, but I might be wrong. I'm no
Right.
scholar.
Well, no. Well, I think it's something. Yeah, he. That's right. He went. Joseph was one of the sons of Jacob, who became Israel. So he's one of the father. When he was one of the 12 tribes, because he had 12 sons, and each one founded a tribe, I think. And the runt of the litter, the little one, who was his favorite, was called Joseph. And Joseph, the other brothers were jealous of him and sold him off into slavery, and he ended up in Egypt, where he became a slave for the pharaoh or something, as these things happen. Anyway, I'm not, like you say, I'm not a religious scholar by any stretch of the imagination, as anyone who knows anything about this can probably tell immediately by this particular discussion. But in any case, he dreamt of all these things, and then there were warnings from God. He was able to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams, if you recall. And he said, "Oh, you'll have 7 years of famine, and you'll have this and that, and all these terrible things happened." Anyway, they were kind of prophecies. And in my dream, I mean, I've had recurring dreams, but in the dream that I remember, and the one that springs to mind, is the day before I did a bungee jump. When I was 19 years old, I went to New Zealand, and amongst many things I did there was a bungee jump, and it was called the pipeline bungee. At the time, it was the second highest bungee jump in the world, and it was from a pipe that basically went across a canyon, and it was 102 meters high, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done in my life. I very nearly didn't jump, but I managed to do it, and I'm so glad that I did, and I will never do it again. That's for sure. But the night before, I had this terrible falling dream, and I remember just falling and falling and falling, and it was terrifying, and I could see the earth coming closer and closer and closer to me. Then I woke up in a cold sweat, just like they will say in the books and in the movies. And that really happened to me, and it was a falling dream. And then the next morning, I went off and did this bungee jump. And so there was a direct correlation. I don't think there was any need for dream interpretation there. And yet, if all the books and everything, they allure to these facts that they're abstract. That wasn't.
The funny thing is that I say about the fact that it's not just made up of your experiences and random thoughts that come into your unconscious, but there is that famous one of your teeth falling out, and that seems to be, I don't know, quite prominent in some sort of, I don't know, fear or experience or something like that. So there are, I guess, there are exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about. I mean, we started off about Valentine's and romantic, and then, and now we're sort of talking about dreams. And I kind of really love the way that our conversations do kind of ebb and flow, and there's no rhyme nor reason to it. And one thing just leads to a completely different topic of conversation. But if you're happy to continue with this topic of conversation, I can tell you about a recurring dream that I had when I was a kid, and I had it again and again and again. Hence, it's a recurring dream.
But just to summarize what you were saying earlier about the Technicolor Dreamcoat, you are 100% right. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat is a musical with lyrics by Tim Rice and music by Andrew Lloyd Webber. The story is based on the coat of many colors, a story of Joseph from the Bible's book of Genesis. So you're exactly right, and I had no idea it was in the Bible. I just thought it was some play that they put on.
Well, there you are, you see. This is the funny thing. When I was a little boy, I was forced to go to church in my school every weekend. We had to go to church, and it was the school was about a mile's walk from the church. And so they'd get all the school people, because I was a boarder, so it was boarding school. It was a Sunday, and I never liked religion at all. I mean, it just seemed kind of forced on me, which of course it was. And we all lined up, and we got marched off to the church, and come rain, snow, or sun. And there we'd go to the church, and we'd pretty much fill the church. There were a few locals in the little village, and there was all of us in our school uniforms, and we'd sit there. We joined the choir. I was in the choir, believe it or not, and it was the most boring thing ever. But I always remember that when I was in church, I always listened to the sermons. I mean, I didn't. I kind of critiqued them in my mind. I thought, oh, that's nonsense, or that doesn't sound right, or yeah, that's a good idea, and I like that. So I didn't just welcome them with open arms, but I was kind of open minded about them. And I guess I saw a lot of people who actually called themselves Christians, sitting there zoning out, thinking about whatever it is they think about. But I would literally sit there and listen to everything that was said. So obviously, you pick up some things. But I did many years ago as well. I decided to read the Bible from cover to cover. And after that, I was going to read the Quran, and then I was going to read, a few other sort of religious texts. But Numbers did it for me. I was in the Old Testament, and I got reading, and I read it. And the book of Genesis, which I think is where this comes from, Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, comes from the book of Genesis, I think. It's the first book. And, the Adam and Eve and all of these things. Some of the and Noah's Ark and some of the sort of most famous stories in the Bible come within the first few pages, and I was amazed at how little information is actually on those pages. It was staggering. There's hardly any information. It's almost everything that you hear is almost entirely conjecture, and people fill the blanks in, if you like. I just couldn't believe
detail, you mean?
Yeah, there's almost no detail at all in any of these things. But curiously, where there is detail is when you get to things like Numbers, where they talk about who begat somebody and somebody begat somebody. So they're talking about the 12 tribes of Israel, and they bring them through generation after generation, and they're literally page after page after page after page after page of just names, nothing but names. And it's the most boring thing you've ever seen in your life. And of course, somebody just sat there and made it all up. There's no possible way that they can know all of this, I'm sure. And as you know, and I'm not slating the Bible, as I said, I read it with an open mind. I wanted once and for all to understand the text, because you get bombarded with people all the time. And I used to get Jehovah's Witnesses coming to the door and things. So I thought, you know what, I'm just I don't know. And I'd never met anyone who actually had read the Bible. You get all these Christians who just read snippets from it here and there, but I never actually met anyone who actually read the thing. And Muslims read the Quran. And that's part of what they do, is they read the Quran. And on the last day of Ramadan, they literally all sit around and they read the Quran from page to page. And so they at least read their text, but most Christians seem to avoid reading the Bible. So I thought I'd give it a go. And anyway, there you go. So Numbers really did it for me. That was pretty much my limit, and I couldn't really get past that. But there were some fantastic things in the Old Testament, and some very, very surprising things as well. For example, Moses. I'm not going to go into it here but by modern standards, he was a pretty extreme person, and ordered the genocide of many tribes of people and his own people, which I've never heard anyone mention before, but it's all there in black and white in the Bible. So it's very, very
That's what always surprises me about the Noah's Ark story, because you see Noah's Ark in children's teachings, and it's one of the most famous stories. But really, it's a story of genocide, but no one really phrases it that way.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, everyone who wasn't them is killed off. Yeah, you're right. It's but it's very, very black and white in the Old Testament. I mean, I could quote if I went and looked at these things up, which I'm it's beyond the scope of this talk, especially as we were talking about St. Valentine's Day, and I never really thought about it. But Moses was pretty strict. There was no tomfoolery with him around, I can tell you.
Oh, you beat me to it. About 5 minutes ago, I was like, where can I fit it in here? And I thought, it's not really appropriate yet. I'm going to get it in there. You did it. You beat me.
Well, he didn't. No, he was pretty austere, and God told him to do this and to do that. And part of it was, the land of milk and honey, Israel, which was fully populated by lots of different tribes of people. And he essentially told everyone that God had told him it was their land, and they had to go in and kill everybody and cleanse the land of all these other people, essentially. So commit genocide and not leave any of their bloodlines there. So basically kill men, women, and children, and steal all their livestock and all their land. And you never hear that. And I've never heard that said. And I just want to keep an open mind. I think there's many, many things in the Bible that's really relevant even today and really, really important. If we actually lived by some of these principles, we'd live in a much better world than the one we do live in. But at the same time, people seem to sort of whitewash over some of the things, the atrocities that are, and Moses is revered, and not just by the Christians, I think by the Muslims also, and certainly by the Jews. And I don't know much about religion, but I did read the Bible, and I was absolutely shocked to discover these things and I was shocked that nobody had ever mentioned them to me, and they'd been kind of sort of avoided. I don't think many people are really aware.
I think it's that. I don't think it's the people trying to suppress it. I just think it's I think the percentage of people that have actually read. I mean, you said cover to cover. I would say. I mean, I would expect it not to even to be in the 1%. I would expect it to be even less than that.
Well, it'd be interesting to know how much it really is. But I imagine a lot of people who are, would call themselves Christians probably haven't read it, but would like to say that they had, even if they hadn't. But the New Testament was much more my thing. The New Testament essentially is the Christian part of the book, right? And it's all about Christ. And regardless, I think you have to admire Christ, whether he was the Son of God or he was a common man, or however it is, and whatever your spin on these things. And I personally like the idea that he was a common man, just like everybody else. And when he said, "I'm the Son of God," he also said that we're all God's children. And he very much made a very strong point of not being above everybody else, and dealing with people with horrible infectious diseases and prostitutes and so on and so forth. And he was a big equalizer. So even if you're a Christian or not, if we assume that this man did live, then whether he's a son of God or a human being, I think he was a tremendous character, a fantastic, visionary in his time. And when you read about some of the things he said, I mean, if we lived by those principles, the world would, as I say, be a much, much better place. But he didn't write anything down, or at least the version of the Bible that we currently have doesn't contain any of his writing. So it's all third party, or at least second party. So it's you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who his disciples and wrote about him many years later. But when you read their accounts of his life, they vary wildly in their description of events, which I found fascinating, because, as you know, I was trained as a reporter and as a journalist, and I've seen firsthand the way stories get twisted and spun, whether deliberately or just because everybody has their own version of events. You get two people in the same room and they'll never notice all of the same things, and they'll have a slightly different take on it. So if you read just the New Testament and about Jesus, they vary tremendously in what they say, and there's very little information about him. As we know, there are missing years where he disappears, and he died 33, and he was only really as Jesus as we know it for a year or two before they did for him. So but I don't know why we got into this and I don't know how we got here, but I guess what I mean is that if you look at some of the writing there, you'll find that it says it gives the what's the word? The paternal line of Jesus, because it's all about fathers. And this kind of brings us back in a way to one of the earlier talks that we had about, about whether we're in a simulation, I guess, because we're talking about and the ancestor paradox, because we're every generation back, you go in your family tree, there's double the number of people. Well, in this, they just follow the father's line. And so each father only has one father, so it's just one line of names. And I can't remember whether it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John's recollection, but two of them at least mention the patriarchy, or the father's line from Jesus. So they go Joseph, both of them. They don't say God, because they would kind of stop there. So they go Joseph, and then they say the father of Joseph was somebody or other, and his father was somebody else. And within 2 or 3 generations, they differ, and then they continue to go back for like 20 generations or more. They've got like name after name after name, and they're all different. And
aren't some of these people like 900 or something, though?
Well, yeah, well then they're probably still around, at that time. In that case, or maybe they talked to them. Maybe they interviewed them.
Noah. Noah's supposed to be 900.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think that they must have. Well, maybe that's the answer to the ancestor paradox, is because they were only one family, right? So they must have had incestuous love, which is a pretty nasty concept when you think about it. It's probably why people don't really think about it very much. And with each generation, they became less and less pure, right? So their lifespan dropped and dropped and dropped. I think that's, somebody described that to me once, but probably in one of these church sermons that I was forced to go on. Interestingly, just a sort of side topic. When I was at church, there were a few people at my school who were Roman Catholics, and I didn't know anything about Catholics at the time. In fact, now I'm married to one, as are you, I think. So I didn't know anything about Catholics. So I just knew that they didn't have to come to church with us, and they all got in a minivan and drove off somewhere. And I just, in my mind, for years and years and years, I always felt incredibly envious of them. I thought that they'd gone off to some fun park or a water park somewhere, the leisure centre. And while we're all at church, they all went off and had ice creams and
Alton
stuff.
Towers, or
Yeah, they went to Alton Towers, and it was a big secret, and they couldn't tell us, because they wouldn't want to make us all envious. But I was convinced that they all had a better time of it.
they were off doing tomfoolery.
They were off doing tomfoolery, yeah. But it turns out that they weren't doing tomfoolery at all. They were sitting there listening to the same kind of thing as I was, but I think a lot of it was in Latin back then. So anyway,
Lent's coming around. Did you know that, or has come around? So
well, funny enough, I did. Yeah, we're sounding very religious, the pair of us, but which is quite strange to think of. But I think perhaps we're religiously aware, because I knew Lent was coming, because it was Shrove Tuesday yesterday, which is Pancake Day, which is tremendously happy day in my household. Did you toss some pancakes?
I was in the office, so no pancakes were partaken in for me. But I got some pictures of people who were making pancakes. That's about as far as I got with it. And I got a nice picture of my daughter smiling at the concept of pancakes.
Oh, well, it's a shame.
Never had them before.
Yeah, it was a shame you couldn't get there to do it. I mean, because I'm in Spain, everyone eats later. I don't eat until about 8:30 at night. And then it's off to bed with a full tummy, which is probably a really bad thing, which might explain why my lack of dreams somehow. But yeah, I flipped up some good pancakes, over the years since I took over the role of daddy, which is the best role that any man can have, in my opinion. I got flicking those pancakes, and got some good wrists. It's all in the wrist action. I got some good technique going now, so they were very well received. When I was a little boy, I don't know about you, but my pancake always had lemon and sugar on it.
Yeah.
and I still had to have one every year. Oh, it's a yearly thing.
Just a completely side step for a second. We were out to lunch recently, and there was a lemon on my daughter's plate, and she went right in there for it, like straight in the gob.
Oh no!
You should have seen the expression on her face.
Oh,
it reminds me of there's a load of YouTube videos of how like dog eats lemon or something like that. Yeah, they're funny. You should check them out. But go on, what were you saying?
Oh, that's sweet. And you were a little bit slow off the mark to stop her. Just it's not cruel, but you know.
Why is this thing on my plate if I can't eat it? I thought it was completely logical from her point of view.
That's a really good question. Yeah, why? Why indeed? It's kind of defeats the object of a lemon, doesn't it? The lemon could be used for other purposes. But yeah, I don't know. I can't remember what I was talking about. Well, we were both very religious, but we're not really. Or we are. We're not. I don't know.
I'm not.
Jury's out. Yeah, I don't follow an organized religion because it's too rigid, you know, and they ask you to believe in all sorts of things which don't really need you to believe in them. You know what I mean? It's surely the idea. If I genuinely think that if Jesus came back today and he said, "Look, I'm Jesus," nobody would believe him. But the people who would believe him least would be the hardline Christians who are saying, "Nope, you're not Jesus. This is sacrilege."
Well, I think it would be fairly easy to make that kind of claim given today's technology. All you need to do is throw a few miracles out, get it up on social. You'd get a seriously big following very quickly. You'd get some exposure and job done.
I don't know, because it's so ingrained in us that, you know, that we shouldn't believe things, and it's a kind of weird. It's a sort of like comes around 360 degrees when you think about it, because at one stage you've got the belief system whereby you're having to, you know, believe all these things like, you know, the Garden of Eden and and a divine huge guy with a big beard or whatever, however you like to believe it, and Jesus doing these miracles, and at the same time, I think the people who believe these kind of stories at the same time would be sort of mortified at the idea of somebody kind of doing them now. And if I've seen magicians doing tricks, replicating Jesus's miracles, walking on water. I've seen that done. I've seen turning water into wine. And in fact, they went further and said, "What drink do you want?" And someone said, "I'll have a beer." They turned water into beer. Someone else said, "Like, I'll have a cocktail." And lo and behold, there was a cocktail. And, you know, from the same urn, it was at a wedding somewhere in the Middle East, and somebody was doing it. And I like the idea of that because, of course, they're not supposed to drink in a lot of the Middle East places, but they were anyway. And, you know, maybe that's it. Yeah, we're only allowed to have water, but if you've got a bit of beer, you know. So anyway, I've seen magicians deliberately replicating and these kind of miracles, and I'm not suggesting that was done in the past. I imagine that a lot of these miracles are sort of, as you said earlier, that they've kind of been exaggerated, let's just say, over time. But I genuinely think, to me, Jesus' message has a lot more authority today if he were literally just one of us and not divine in any way. But I think at the time, because you have to put these books in their context, and the Bible, at least in, you know, we're led to believe, is an ancient document which comes has been preserved and obviously changed a little bit, and a few books probably edited out and stuff along the way, but nevertheless it comes from a very, very different time, and it served a different purpose. And I think in those days people didn't have science, and they believed all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and I think for them they required that Jesus, in order to follow him, in order for him to be the Messiah, it would have been required that he was in some way special, some way different from the rest of us, and that he was divine or semi-divine. And I think certainly for me, and for a lot of people, I think the opposite is true today. I think it's very easy to discard these kind of things as fables, and to actually gain our respect, and for us to actually take his message seriously, he would need to convince us that he is in fact just Joe Average, as average as possible. And when you read the Bible, he kind of does try and tell everyone time and time again that we're all the same, we're all kids, we're all equal, we're all the sons and daughters of God, and so on and so forth. So and he dies on the cross to be like one of us. So he kind of is trying to do that as much as possible. Yeah, I mean, I personally, I think that I would take him a lot more seriously if he were kind of some celebrity today. Of course, celebrities are kind of almost on a pedestal as well, aren't they? But if he was a celebrity today, if he claimed that he was the Son of God, I think a lot of people would write him off straight away. That would be it.
Well, there are people who have made those sorts of claims today.
Well, true. Yeah, maybe some of them are the Son of God, for all we know. But at the same time, I think if he claimed that he was exactly like us, we'd find that a lot easier to believe, and perhaps we'd actually listen to his message a lot more, rather than all arguing about whether he's the Son of God or not.
Well, that's Buddha, isn't it? Buddha is just a man who.
Yeah. Well, he was a prince, supposedly. So, but yeah, that's right. There's no, in Buddhism, there's no divinity in such. There's no deity, rather. I think there is divinity. You can reach divinity. You can reach nirvana, can't you?
You can. I think the term is. I might be wrong. I think the term is like transcend.
Transcend. That's a great
but
term.
Yeah, that's just a human, and speaking of all like the similar things that that Jesus talks about,
That's
and yet
right.
there's no Son of God stuff going on there.
No, but it's a romantic kind of story to it, maybe he gave the occasional Valentine's card. I'm not sure. Actually, can we just go quickly back to that, because you're right. I think in Spain, historically, a lot of people live in the same sort of area as each other, and so there'd be no requirement to send cards. And if you've ever had any sort of dealings with the Spanish postal system, you'd know that it's a bit hit and miss, the postal system, to say the least. You never know when a card's going to get there. I've known cards to arrive. I've known letters and things to arrive from the UK to here within a day, and yet something that I've posted to someone in the same town can take months to arrive. So perhaps that's why there's not much of a card, and there's no requirement anyway, because if you're all living very locally to each other, then you see each other and talk to each other. Whereas in the UK, especially at the time of the Victorians and their empire, where people, you might have family members across the world. You might not be. You might have soldiers who are separated from their wives and stuff, sending Valentine's cards, and certainly the Christmas card tradition is about kind of that one time in a year where you make an effort to reconnect with your family and friends who you haven't heard of from the rest of the year. So I guess that makes sense. Yeah, the Valentine's thing is a bit like, to me, it's a bit like Christmas and other things. I mean, Christmas is a magical time for kids.
Well, I was going to use the example of Easter, but I think Christmas is probably a better one.
No, I think Easter is a great one, because it's quite similar in many ways. Again, here in Spain, Easter is a completely different thing. It's a much more religious. It's founded and based in religion. It's all about the story of it's all about the story of Jesus and the Passion. As he and they put on these great plays with all the local people. In fact, here in Benalmádena, they've got this amazing permanent stage set up on the side of a mountain, where they've got all the different sort of buildings, and every Easter they build not a stadium, what's it called, where you've got all the chairs sort of lined up in a in a sort of semicircle around.
Tomfoolery, isn't it?
Yeah, probably is. Well, anyway, they make a big song and dance of it, and they take Jesus through the town. A guy who's dressed as Jesus, and he's got his cross, and they sort of reenact it all. They don't actually nail things into his, to quote The Life of Brian, nail them up, I say, nail some sense into them, which always tickles me somewhat. But no, they really go to town with it, and it's the story of Jesus, and that is, and as you've got all the parades, the incredible parades that go through in Spain, Semana Santa, Holy Week, that means, and it's the biggest here in Andalusia in the south of Spain. It's the biggest event of the year by far, bar none, is Easter, and it's not an Easter egg in sight. It's very religious, and that's the message, and it's the most important message to the Catholics here in Spain. But in the UK, it's and in the States, I think, to a lesser or greater extent, it's all about chocolate eggs, isn't it? I mean, that's what it is. Easter cards, chocolate eggs, the Easter bunny, and frankly, not anything to do with religion in sight. But I gotta say, I prefer it. I mean, the going to see the parades are an amazing thing, and you got these people who are penitent. They some of them they walk barefoot, and they carry these incredible statues that sometimes need 20 or 30 people to hold them up. They're so heavy, and they walk them all through the towns and cities. Very somber event, and it's quite a spectacle. And I'm very glad that they do it.
The mic's making some clicky noises.
My mic. Oh yes,
Yeah.
you're right. I got a bit hot. Let me undo that. Yeah. So it's a big somber event, but in the UK, there's nothing like that as far as I'm aware. I don't know if you've come across. I mean, you do see in schools and things like this. They do the sort of passion play, don't they? They do the Easter story, which is great.
Yeah. I looked up similarities between Buddha and Jesus, and they are conceived in a miraculous manner, child prodigy, underwent a long period of fasting while traveling alone, tempted by but overcame the devil, began ministry around the age of 30, had disciples who traveled with him, performed miracles such as curing blindness and walking on water, renounced worldly riches, rebelled against religious elite, and dispatched disciples before death to spread message. The teachings are the golden rule: love others, love your enemies, turn the other cheek, help others, do not judge others, disdain wealth, do not kill, spread the word. So very similar.
Bit of a pattern emerging, and I think if you look at some of the other religions as well, you'll find that I've heard it quoted that that there's a much older, is it Ra, or one of the most important ancient Egyptian gods was also remarkably similar to Jesus, and that I've heard people speculate that Jesus is actually based on that. Certainly, the Jews.
In Religulous.
Religulous?
Yeah.
No.
By Bill Mayer. It's a documentary. It covers all those.
I'll have to watch that. Religulous.
Yeah, all the copying stuff of. Like one of the examples that you're talking about is Noah's Ark is plagiarized.
Well, I mean, they're all kind of the same story, aren't they? I mean, a lot of these things come from the same or a similar area, so around the Middle East area where there was a lot of interaction, and also we had the trade routes that came from India. So even though India is a little bit further away, India is related to Persia. It's right next to Pakistan and India. Our next door neighbors to Persia, which is modern day Iran, and that's next to Iraq, which is where Babylon came from, which is definitely squarely in the Middle East. And so there must have been a lot of movement of ideas in this area, or especially with people bringing. I mean, there was probably a lot of people living in a different part of the world, tradesmen, people who are merchants, and so on and so forth. Never mind slaves, because it was rife with slavery back there. So there must have been quite a lot of dispersion of ideas and sort of interaction between these cultures. So it kind of doesn't massively, surprise me, to be perfectly honest. But what I find interesting is the idea of things getting set in their way. So a religion essentially says these are the traditions, and traditions to me are something that are really superficial, and they're sort of things that we take for granted as they've always happened, and yet a lot of them are very, very new. For example, I can't remember exactly when, but in Spain, every New Year's Eve they have a tradition of, instead of singing "Old Lang Syne," which I've never heard of before, except when they watch American films, and cracking open the champagne, they do the countdown with 12 grapes. So every bong of the clock is a grape, and they have to stuff it in their mouth and eat it. And then there's the other one, bong, and they have to eat another grape. And it's quite difficult to eat 12 grapes within 12 seconds or whatever it is. It's pretty tricky. And I wonder how many New Years someone chokes to death, because grapes are one of the world's most easy foods to choke to death on. So I'm not sure it's necessarily the safest way to end or to welcome in the new year. But this is a tradition that in Spain, it's just ageless tradition. So I looked it up, and in fact, because I thought that's a bit of a weird tradition, I wonder where that comes from. And I think it's about 50 years old, no more. I can't remember the exact date. If I wasn't walking around holding my computer and talking into the mic right now, as I am apt to do, I could Google it. But in fact, one year they had a massive harvest of grapes, and they weren't able to sell them all, so they gave them all away to be eaten on as a sort of, here you go, just have these grapes, because they're going to waste otherwise. And hence the tradition was born. And from that year onwards, it became a local tradition, which I guess spread across Spain as a lovely idea. And now there's an ageless tradition every year, where in Spain and Spanish-speaking countries as well, I think, they eat 12 grapes as the clock strikes to welcome in the new year. So this is an example of a tradition that's not really been around that long, but if you want to think about it, it seems like it's ageless, and you couldn't possibly break that or amend that tradition in any way. That would just be a terrible thing to do, And you have this kind of, I suppose you become the caretaker of of a tradition, and woe betide you if you were to break with tradition, And it ties culture in, and I think it stems the flow of new ideas. It stops innovation and change happening, and I think a lot of people are very comfortable with change not happening. People are scared of change generally. But anyway, that's one tradition. I'm sure that you can think of any number of other traditions which seem like they've always been around that haven't. I know that another one I heard was the white wedding dress, whereas apparently women used to just wear their best dress to get married in, and Queen Victoria chose a white dress to signify purity, and from that time onwards, all the wealthy women who could afford it decided that they would have a white dress, and hence the white wedding was born, and it's 150, 200 years old. That's it. So it's still reasonable amount of time. Technically an antique, right? Over 100 years old, but still not an ageless tradition. So I think a lot of these traditions are not as old as we think. But religions always try to lock these traditions in place, I think. and stop any form of deviation or change, which is the thing that I don't. That's why I don't really get involved with religion. But the concept, the ideas, the spiritual side of things, I think that's got no place staying within a religion. That's available to everybody. So there you go. That's my take on it.
Fair enough.
Anyway, I think I've completely religioned myself out, and I had no idea, and about you, that all of that would come from talking about Valentine's Day.
Well, on a lighter note, yesterday I had no idea that there was a show. It popped up on my YouTube recommendations, as many things do.
Yeah.
Called The Flash, and if you know about comic characters, there's a TV show called The Flash out, and I think it's in like its 4th season or something like that. Okay. So it wasn't on Netflix, unfortunately for me. I think it's on Netflix in the US, but it's not in the UK. So I decided to download it on Amazon. So I watched the first episode last night. Pretty cool. I like it. Super speed.
Fantastic. Well, I love The Flash, even though I don't know, I haven't watched it or anything, but I love The Flash from The Big Bang Theory, because any character that Sheldon Cooper loves has got to be a character that I'm going to love too.
Exactly.
So fantastic. So you started watching The Flash.
What's the I forget what it's called now. The big thing that they built where they collide particles together.
The Hydro. I've forgotten what it's called now. The Hadron Collider or something.
Yeah, something like that.
The one in CERN in on the Swiss-French border.
Well, the story is that, they build that, and for a short amount of time it runs just fine, but then it explodes, and people within a certain radius sort of have side effects from this explosion.
Mutant powers.
And one of them is this guy, Barry Allen, and one of the side effects is that he gets super speed. And just watch the first episode. It's pretty good. You should check it out.
Well, I will. That's a good one. While we're talking about TV, and it's difficult to steer clear of TV because I think we really are living in the golden age of telly. I've heard people say that, and I totally believe it. I mean, the quality of TV shows now is just so far ahead of anything that we watched before. Back in the 90s, we had a few kind of well-known TV shows, especially the American ones, where they'd go on and on and on. However many episodes, season after season, and it was just a plethora. We had the Star Trek Next Generation and the various spin-offs from that, which I loved. But if you watch them now, they're kind of they're a little bit their storyline's a bit simplistic, really, compared to the things we're used to. But each episode has its own self-contained story, which means that you can watch them out of order, which I think is great. Because I'm a great stickler for watching everything in order. I mean, I watched The Big Bang Theory. Every now and again it would be on TV, and I never really got into it. And then one day I thought, I was watching it and I thought, you know what, this is actually really funny. This warrants watching from the beginning. So I went back and I watched every single episode from the very first one up and fell in love with all the characters and the plot and the development of the characters. And it's fantastic. But in the 90s, what was the other one that was really, really popular?
Friends.
Oh, Friends. Yeah, there was Friends.
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld was. I really liked Seinfeld. Actually, it was, but it wasn't something that you'd like. Oh, I've got to watch Seinfeld. It was just amusing. But again, you could watch it out of sync. You didn't have to watch them one after the other. But the X-Files. That's really difficult for me to remember that, because after the X-Files came the X Factor, which is a completely different kettle of fish altogether. But the X-Files was I loved the X-Files. It was a kind of out there, avant-garde kind of, Agent Mulder and Scully from the FBI going out on a limb and trying to investigate all of these strange occurrences that nobody else would investigate. And he got a name for himself. Nobody took him seriously in the FBI, and he had all these but he had all these secret meetings, clandestine meetings in car parks, where top people within the CIA and the FBI would sort of leak documents to him, and about alien encounters and strange people and it was fantastic. I don't know if you really like that, but I really got into it. But I think it's still going. I think they've sort of brought it back.
They've just booted it back up again, haven't they?
So that might be worth a watch, but sometimes it's better not to go back. Because I loved Star Trek: The Next Generation, but I kind of don't want to go back in a way, because maybe I won't love it as much. Maybe it's a sort of a reminiscing thing. It's got a lovely sort of retro glow on it right now, and it won't match up to the kind of things we're used to. But,
maybe.
I love films, and you love films. I mean, I know you love films.
I watched a really good one a couple of nights ago.
What was that?
It's called Concussion, and it is about the guy who discovered that. It's called CTE. It's a medical diagnosis, and it's the story is about the doctor who discovered that American football players were getting very nasty symptoms from playing American football, because they all clash heads together.
Yeah.
And it's about the big industry of the American football not wanting to address the in the same way that sort of big tobacco would say there's nothing wrong with smoking, that they wanted to say there wasn't anything that could happen to you later on in life. There weren't any depression links or anxiety or anything like that. And they had a string of suicides of, I think they call them blockers or something. And if you're in the US listening to this, apologize for my complete ignorance on American football. Or blockers or tacklers or something like that. And they all started. And there's no sort of, as far as I'm aware, there's no way to diagnose it beforehand, because it all sort of looks like just common things that people would get. But he started noticing this, and it was his battle against the whole institution of.
And it's called Concussion. It's quite a modern film, then. It's just recently come out, presumably.
I watched it on Netflix, so it's not that new, but Will Smith really good in that film.
Oh, he's a great actor. Yeah, Will Smith, brilliant. That kind of reminds me. I came across somewhere in the news an article about dodgeball. I think that's played a lot in the States as well. I don't know if you've ever played dodgeball, Tom.
The only thing that I can think about when you say dodgeball is Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn. I must have seen that film six or seven times.
Well, that's the first time I ever seen it. Yeah, go ahead.
Nobody makes me bleed my own blood.
These guys are funny, but that's the first time I ever came across the concept of dodgeball. I didn't even know it existed. I'd certainly never played it. We used to play things called British Bulldogs. I don't know if you ever played that, where you have to run across a yard or something, and someone in the middle has to stop you, and it can get pretty violent sometimes. But dodgeball was new to me. But I read an article which basically said, stop playing dodgeball, because the balls hit you in the head, and it's the same kind of concept as this concussion thing. It's extremely dangerous, and people don't realize that it's actually causing problems later on in life sometimes. Obviously, if you do it once or twice, it's probably all right, okay, but not guaranteed, because it only takes that one hit, doesn't it, to cause irreparable damage potentially. But I think it's more the sort of consistent banging that goes on body parts, and especially on the head, which
phrasing.
Yeah, well, it's Valentine's Day, sorry, consistent banging is probably inappropriate. A bit of tomfoolery. So anyway, dodgeball, that's probably something to dodge, to avoid, if you pardon the pun. But and there was something I wanted to come back to, which was related to that movie, and it was probably not the dodgeball. Maybe I've got a bit of damage as well. I can't remember now, but yeah, I mean, just talking about movies and films, I generally hardly ever watch any movies these days. I mean, in fact, because I've got kids, most of the time I go to the cinema, Picture House if you're from the East End of London, the movie theatre if you're from the States. When I go to the cinema, I just watch children's movies really, and some of them are fantastically good, I must admit. And I thoroughly enjoy going with my girls and watching the movies. And sometimes, because we go to watch them in Spain, and we watch them in what they call versión original, which is original version, which is most Spanish films and TV shows are dubbed into Spanish. And it's a really weird thing because a lot of Spanish people have never heard famous actors talking in their real voice because they've only ever heard the dubbed version. And sometimes it sounds sometimes it's done very, very well, but other times it just doesn't sound anything like them. So we go to the cinema and we watch them in original version. And sometimes, very often, we get the whole cinema to ourselves. And in Spain, when they build something, they do it properly. They don't do it like in England where occasionally you'll have this rundown old cinema, sorry, Brighton, but Brighton used to have this state-of-the-art cinema when I was 15 or 16. I think when I was 15 it opened, and it was brilliant down in the marina there, but it's so dated now and old, and it's probably the best cinema in the city, and there's a city of 300,000 people more or less. So probably could do with a bit of updating in that. I think, but anyway, in Spain, they're really state-of-the-art, brilliant cinemas, and we pretty much get the cinema to ourselves. And we go in there and we watch a movie, and the girls can dance around and have a fantastic day because a lot of these movies have, they're musical movies, aren't they? I guess these children's ones. They have some really great music going on for the girls, and they get up and they dance around, and afterwards they run behind the screen and they run around, and nobody cares, and they can do whatever they want, sit wherever you want. It's fantastic. It's like going to your own personal screening. But having said that, I very rarely go because it's kind of difficult for me now to watch a movie. It has to be a fantastically top-notch movie because I'm so used to having 60 hours worth of storyline and plot and character development, and the one I'm currently watching is one that you recommended to me a few weeks ago, which is Suits, which somehow passed me by, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And
the new episodes coming out March 29th
of Suits.
Yeah, if you're able to get that far along. If you've just started it, then you've got a long way to go.
Well, I'm on season 3 now. So I kind of race through these things.
Yeah.
Each one is 3/4 of an hour long, and I tend to watch an episode or two every night before I go to sleep, because the girls, my wife falls asleep pretty quickly, generally speaking, and then I just I've always been a bit of a night owl, much less so now, but I watch an episode or two and then I kind of go to sleep, so I can get through these things pretty quick. But anyway, have you got any? Just bringing it back, Valentine's Day. Have you got anything nice planned for today?
No. The newish baby arrival is sort of put a damper on that whole thing.
Well, I totally get that, but I do think that you need to make an effort, because in my experience, there's it's a funny thing. It's a slow erosion of your relationship, because you found this lady, this girl who's now a lady and a mother and married. You made her into this amazing sort of person. You wanted to marry her, you married her, and everything's great. And then you suddenly find yourselves being parents, and that's your prime role. And before you know it, all the romance and everything just goes out. You're completely exhausted, and you never get any time to yourselves. And when you do get time to yourself, you just want to sit down, put your feet up. And if you're anything like me, you get the job of doing foot massage, which may or may not lead on to something a little bit more. Anyway, that's another topic.
X-rated of that. Adult content.
Yeah, it probably doesn't most of the time because you're too exhausted. But yeah, I mean, I think it's nice every now and again to do something special to sort of let her know that she's not just a mother. Although, in my own wife, talking about her, that's the best thing. She loves being a mother. It's the best sort of role that you could ever have. I love being a father. It's the best thing I've ever done. But at the same time, no person is just one thing. We're all multifaceted, and part of that is that you're a lover, and you need to keep the fires burning, if you know what I mean. So yeah, just do something I think a little bit surprising. The issue I have, and I think we went off on a massive red herring sidetrack, but I think we were discussing at some point about Christmas and Easter, and I apologized. I took it all off into religion somehow. God knows where that came from when we're talking about Christmas and Easter. But nevertheless, it's basically been commercialized to the point where there's no real meaning behind it. But at the same time, if you don't do it, it's kind of wrong. Do you know what I mean? You feel kind of, I don't know about you, but I feel kind of blackmailed into partaking in this tradition of Valentine's Day.
It's a social norm, yeah.
Yeah, if you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because if you do, it has really very little meaning, because it's not personal. It's not, you buy a mass-produced Valentine's card, you get some chocolates or some, after a few years she says, I don't want any more roses, and so you go, okay, some perfume, you give her some perfume. I've got so much perfume, I don't need more. You go, okay, chocolates. Not really into chocolates much. It's just like difficult to get this gift, but the real reason is because it's impersonal. It's not a personal gift, and it's not a personal day. But at the same time, if you don't do it, if you say, yeah, we're not going to do it, and if she says, oh, we won't do it, what she kind of means is you better do it, but it's got to be personal somehow. And it's really, I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So there. That's my thoughts on it. But having said that, okay. I did partake and got 3 cards. I always feel a bit weird when I pile up at a shop and I buy 3 separate Valentine's cards. I always get a bit of a funny look, and I feel obliged to tell them that I'm not Casanova. I actually have a wife and 2 daughters, and I'm, they've always had their
and they've heard that one before, right?
Yeah, they've heard it every single time. But I like to think that every now and again, some player does tool up. He tools up there and he says, "I have these 5 cards," and they go, "Oh, you got a lot of children, have you?" And he goes, "Well, I wouldn't know. These are for my 5 lovers," something like that. But yeah, it probably never happens.
Not that I know of is normally the answer. But,
yeah, not that I know of. Yeah. Wow, I see. You said that yourself.
No, I just watched too many films.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay.
Anyway, mate, I've got so much stuff on my to-do list, so I got to wrap it up. If that's cool with you.
Yeah, absolutely, totally with you. I'm getting reminded that I have to crack on with other things, but it's a good chat. And a nice bit of tomfoolery and some religion and lots of other stuff along the way. So typical meandering conversation. Love it.
All right, mate.
Take care, Tom. Enjoy.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.